All righty. Well, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to our first of many M&A webinars. Today, we're going to go over mastering your MSP exit strategy. So I see several people that I know, but for those of you who I don't know, my name is Joanna Mirov, and I am the legacy CEO of MXO Tech. MXO was a Chicago-based MSP that I started back in 2006 and ultimately sold my company to Entiva in September of 2022. And so now I've transitioned after my sale in working in the M&A department here at Entiva with CVC. So I'm really excited to host this webinar today and interview Sagar, because when I was selling my business, I always wanted to talk to other CEOs, other business owners who have gone through this journey, but I was afraid to do that. I didn't want anybody to know that I was thinking about selling my company or asking these questions. So I thought, why don't we demystify this, put it out there in the open, and ask the questions that I would want to know. And we're going to have a Q&A as well, so that you can also ask whatever questions you guys have, but hopefully we will cover everything that you're thinking about. And really, it's so important to prepare yourself, because whether you're thinking about exiting now or 3 years or 5 years from now, knowledge is power. So I'm really excited just to have a very open and honest conversation about that. Before I go into our interview with Sagar, who, by the way, started his MSP also in Chicago here, and with his partner, Isaac. And they had it for a short period of time. It was 13 years. I know many of you own your business for 20, 30 years. So 13 years isn't that long for starting a company. And Middle Ground Technologies became a very successful multi-million-dollar business, again, from startup to a multi-million-dollar company that eventually he sold to Entiva. So before we get going, I'd like to ask Christopher Volmut-Carstens, who goes by CVC, who's the Chief M&A Officer here at Entiva, just to introduce quickly Entiva and himself, and then we'll go right into our interview.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna. Great to be here today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think this should be some really wonderful and differentiated content. For those of you who don't know me, Christopher Volmut-Carstens, just call me CVC. It's much easier. I'm the Chief M&A Officer here at Entiva. I joined Entiva about 3.5 years ago, but I do have almost 20 years of M&A experience. I'm responsible for the full M&A lifecycle here at Entiva, from origination of transactions all the way through the full integration of the businesses that we bring on board. We've been fortunate to operate in a very active M&A space, as evidenced by now 15 acquisitions that we've done over the last 7 years. So it's very, very exciting times. Entiva, by background, we're a scaled MSP with over 450 employees, founded by our current CEO, Stephen Fradkin, nearly 20 years ago. I think it's actually November of this year will be our 20-year anniversary, which is super cool. We're a leading IT services company that provides businesses across the US with advanced technology expertise in your local communities. We help clients use technology as a competitive advantage to ensure stability and drive growth. The services that we offer include managed IT, cybersecurity, strategic consulting, cloud solutions, and business process automation. We've got a world-class team that genuinely cares about the relationships that they build and understands that response and precision are fundamental keys to successful partnerships. The last thing I'll touch on is, what does winning look like at Entiva? And it's defined by 3 things. So first is a legacy-defining brand, one that is characterized by strong client and employee retention. It's known for our purpose of growing each other, our core values, and a positive community impact. Second is around wanting to be the most attractive choice. We want to set the gold standard to attract the best talent, clients, vendors, investors, heck, even competitors, to be part of the Entiva story. And last, it's about extraordinary financial results. We want to provide better than ordinary for everyone who's involved with Entiva. So I'm looking forward to a really great discussion here. I'm going to recede back into the background to allow Joanna and Sagar to really shine. If you've got questions for me, feel free to ask at the end or reach out to me. And I know Joanna is going to share an exciting offer at the end of our conversation today to meet with me. So to take a look at your business using our proprietary valuation technology, if that's of any interest to you. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Joanna and Sagar. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, CVC. So, all right, before we get started, just to give you kind of a quick outline, we're going to talk about how Sagar got started, how he ultimately chose his buyer. We're going to talk about how not to underestimate the M&A process, because I think a lot of people don't realize that this becomes another job in itself, how to prepare yourself mentally and professionally. So personally and professionally, right? Because we all have our personal lives and we're also still trying to run a business at the same time. And then we're adding the whole M&A component. And finally, I want to talk about how do you create the right team around you and prepare your company for the highest valuation. I think that's really important. So congratulations to everybody who joined today's webinar, because it's critical to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into. And I think you've spent your life's work here, right? Many of us, 15, 20, 30 years, you don't want to walk away making the wrong decision. So speaking of, Sagar, if you don't mind giving people a little bit of a background for those of you who don't know who you are, who are you? How did you get started? And how did you decide to sell your company and ultimately choose the right buyer for you and Isaac?
Thanks, Joanna, and thanks, CVC, for the intro as well. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for jumping on, taking time on a Friday. So I'm Sagar Pandya, born and raised in Chicago. I am the son of a sole proprietor who was also in the tech space. So at a young age, I was exposed to entrepreneurship. My father would take me to sales meetings to his clients. He used to sell phone systems back in the day. If you remember, PBXs, he used to be the PBX guy. So I'd go to sales meetings, I'd go to installs, and I saw firsthand what it meant to be a business owner. And that really stuck with me throughout high school and college, was just that thought of creating something out of nothing. And it was super exciting to go through that journey growing up, because it really shaped and built the character that I have today. I met my partner, Isaac, almost 20 years ago at our first IT job. And him and I are very similar. For those that know him on the call, we share a lot of similar personality traits. We really get along really well. And we just started having some conversations, Joanna. We said, hey, we're doing this IT job, just like most of you, right? Started as a technician or an engineer. And we said, hey, what about doing some stuff on the side for some extra income? How can we help other organizations and people with their technology? So we decided to start an IT company. And this was really at a time where managed IT, right? The monthly recurring model was still pretty new. It wasn't like super popular. We started just with the premise of, hey, if we could get a couple clients a month, maybe make, $500 to $1,000 a month, we're going to be very happy. I had no idea that, years later it would lead to a successful sale. But the journey was really fun. It was really exciting. And it really taught us a lot about both ourselves and our capabilities as leaders in our organization.
So here you had your business, it was going well, 13 years into it. Most business owners, and you're pretty young still, right? You're not at the retirement age. What made you decide to sell your company?
The decision was really, there was a few things. I think first and foremost was, and I say this all the time, was the desire to make an impact on a larger scale, right? How do we impact more organizations and more people at a faster rate? And growing organically is fun, right? You can make great strides and you can grow and add clients to your roster. But we were hungry. We wanted more, right? We wanted the ability to impact more organizations, more people. We wanted to essentially jump on a rocket ship, right? So that was first and foremost, was the bigger impact. Secondly, for our team, we wanted our employees to have a much larger career path, right? Not just be, the sole procurement person or the sole account manager or an IT tech or an engineer on a small team. We wanted our staff to also have career opportunities and have access to larger deployments and networks and ways to work with departments that were also larger. So I think number 2, Joanna, was people. Number 3 was depth in capabilities for our clients. Without our customers, I'm sure everybody on this call agrees, without our customers, we can't do what we do every single day, right? They're the ones that allow us to succeed and grow. So that depth of services, right? Giving more to our clients and being able to support them in ways that we couldn't have as our own organization, and having access to that additional support was beneficial. And then I think number 4 was also for me at least, was a personal growth perspective, right? How could I bring in this organization that we've built into another complementary organization like Intiva? How can we build together, and how do we exist together to grow? Those are really the things that I thought long and hard about for a few years. And it wasn't just like one day we woke up and decided we want to sell. It was years of thinking through and getting to the point where you're mentally ready, because going through the process, as we'll talk about later in this call, is challenging, and it's only going to happen if you're truly bought in and you have all the right reasons to move forward.
So, okay, so it sounds like you did prepare, you and Isaac figured out what your future could look like with a larger organization. Well, that's great. So how do you now go about finding that right buyer, right? Because like when I was selling my MSP, I had a lot of the same thoughts as you, Sagar, actually. And I wanted to continue to work, right? Because I'm also not at a retirement phase. And I was thinking, well, what do I need to exit today? What do my employees need? What do my clients need, right? So how did you go about finding the right buyer that could meet all of your needs? And how did you prepare for that?
That's probably one of the most important questions as you go through and consider an M&A process. I think first and foremost is getting the right mindset above everything else. If you're not a hell yes on the process every day that you think about it, there is going to be a much more harder uphill battle to even go through that first step. So for us, the first most important thing was the mindset and the conviction that this is the path that we're going to move forward with, right? Especially the folks on the call that have partners, right? Isaac and I were super aligned on the process, and I'm so grateful that we had such a great relationship. We saw everything exactly the same. So it made it a lot easier, right, to then move forward in the next step of the process. I think number 2 is really auditing your organization from a cultural and operational standpoint. What's important to you as an MSP, right? Is it ensuring that you have the largest client base? Is it having the most certificates for your staff? Is it having the most regions under growth? Is it good brand equity? What's most important? Is it core values? You have to really understand what thrives in your company. What makes it so unique? What makes you drive to the office or drive results for your customers? And why is it so important to you? I think when you get those two, when you really fully 100% align yourself and then fully understand who you are as an organization, that's half the battle. The second half of it is you have to do some recruiting, you have to do some scouting, some networking. There's a lot of industry MSP events that happen that allow you to meet folks, so you can go and meet them in person. And I'm sure everyone on this call is getting no less than a handful of emails from buyers in their mailboxes, right? And what really started it, to be quite honest, Joanna, we responded to one of those and said, okay, we know we're aligned. We want to make the impact on a bigger scale. We know what middle ground is all about. We're getting these emails 3 to 5 times a week for the last few years. Let's respond to one of them. Let's just see what they have to offer. So that really started the process for us. And it ended up being a legitimate conversation. But without us first being fully aligned, myself and Isaac, and us not understanding who we are as a company, we wouldn't know the folks that we were talking to on whether they would be the right fit or not. So it was a process. And again, it took a few years of us thinking about it, really figuring out if this was the right thing. And then responding to one of those emails, we met folks in person at industry events. And then we even searched online to see if there were folks on LinkedIn or on the web that could help us drive through the process. So it wasn't really, it was like an organic thing for us, right? We had to go out and actually commit to having the conversations. And that ultimately led us to our transition.
Okay, great. So that's another thing, I think it's so important to start that process and build those relationships in advance, right? Because this isn't just a money transaction. You are going to hand over all of your customers, your employees, even your own career path, right? So you want to make sure that this is a true partnership and the company that you choose is really aligned with you. But I think, Sagar, you made a great point in the very beginning. It's preparing yourself and making sure you know what it is that you want first. And a lot of people that I talk to, they don't even think about their own career. They're just thinking, how much money do I need? How much money am I going to sell my business for? But then once that happens, they're like, well, what am I going to do? So did you and Isaac talk about what your next career path transition was going to be as well? Did you know what that looked like?
We did. And I'm glad that you brought this up because so many of us, it's not MSP specific. There's so much of an identity attachment to your organization because it is, quite frankly, the purpose of your existence for a long period of time, right? So we talked about owners owning these companies for 15, 20, 30 years. That's a very large chunk of your life where you associate yourself as a founder, CEO, partner, COO, whatever title you have with your organization, right? So there's an identity attachment. And what Isaac, myself, what we had done was after we decided 100%, hell yes, we're going through this process and understanding what made our MSP unique, that third pillar was going through I call it an identity detachment, right? So the moment that middle ground transitioned and became under Antiva, what did that mean for us? Because we are no longer going to be C-level CEOs, partners, presidents. We're not going to be those folks anymore at middle ground because that company has now been absorbed into Antiva. What does that look like moving forward? What is our purpose on a day-to-day basis from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep? And we talked at great lengths about that. There are certain things that I'm really good at doing from a personality perspective. There are some things that Isaac is really good at and what makes him really thrive and makes him happy. So we had those conversations. We said, all right, once this transition happens, what's the future look like? What is going to be our purpose every day when we wake up to the moment we go to sleep? And is the work that we're doing going to be just as meaningful as when we were doing the work building our organization? And having that conversation, right? 12, 18, 24 months into the future. What does it look like for us when we transition into the organization? What does that next step look like? That picture has to be painted very well, because if not, and I've seen this with other entrepreneurs and other MSP owners, where they lose sight of their identity, Joanna, because all they've known is their organization, right? I'm sure you can relate to some of that as well, where you have your identity attached and now it's gone. What's that purpose? Having those conversations was very important for us internally.
Yeah, absolutely. And being the boss, right? Being the final decision maker. Suddenly, now I have a boss. I have to answer to someone. And I tease CVC and I even have to do expense reports and things. I mean, I know it's a little thing, right? But we don't have to do these things. And you can take a first class business trip if you want, So now things change. And I think you have to be comfortable with that. But you also have to remember what you did is for the greater good, right? And the ultimate long-term goal. So let's dive into, one of the things that you talked about is not underestimating the M&A process. I would love for you to talk about once you do decide mentally, that you want to sell your company, you want to exit, whether that's just selling it and retiring or selling it and joining a team like Sagar and I did here at Antiva, right? How do you talk about underestimating the process? and how that
Absolutely.
impacts you, and what did you do and what do you recommend?
Absolutely. Yeah. My favorite part of this call is this portion of it. And for those that follow me on social media, on LinkedIn, you've already seen me talk at great lengths about my experience. Um, Listen, the M&A process, if you're deciding to go through it, it is going to take you a minimum of 2 years from the moment you sign and bring on either an advisor or find a potential buyer and sign an LOI to the point of which your company, your PSA, your RMM, all your tools, our employees are integrated into the new organization. Minimum of 2 years. That's the experience that I've had so far. And that's the reason why I underestimated it. It's my first sale, right? It's not like I have the track record like CVC does. He's seen so many transitions, right? So many exits, so many sales. This was the first one for us. And we did have fellow entrepreneurs around us that gave us some feedback and some advice, like, hey, here's what it's going to take. But until you truly go through the process, Joanna, I'm sure you agree, you don't know what it's like until you've been under that microscope and gone through day by day to get it done. I hugely underestimated that.
Well, and I hear people say, I'm going to sell my company in 5 years, and then they don't do anything about it. They're not preparing for it. They're not having these conversations. They're not building these relationships, right? So they start year 5. Well, if
Yeah.
it takes 2 years, so you're really talking 7 years, right?
7 years.
And
Yeah.
for me, it took me 3 years just to mentally prepare to sell my company and then also build some of those relationships. So when I ultimately decided on Tiva, it wasn't like, I went through my checklist and made those calls from those emails that came into my inbox. I was talking to different people, asking questions. And and I met a competitor of mine here in Chicago, Steve Banky, who owned 3 Points. And Steve and I always exchanged information, as all MSPs really should. There's enough business for all of us out there.
Absolutely.
And we were talking, I built my relationship with Steve probably like 5 years prior. Ultimately, he sold to Antiva, and I asked him, what was that journey like? Right? He was really positive, and we started talking. So we talked for a couple of years before he introduced me to Stephen Fradkin, the CEO of Antiva. And then Stephen and I talked for a few years, right? Because for me, this might be my only sale, and I wanted to make sure that I made the best decision. So I think building that relationship is so critical. And then also knowing that the potential buyers that you're talking to, you don't, just because you're talking to them doesn't mean you have to sell your business to them tomorrow, right?
Right.
You
Right.
got it's to build a relationship, it's to feel comfortable, it's to get to know them, and for them to get to know you, so that when you get into that partnership, you feel great about it. It's kind of like a marriage. You're not going to go marry someone you just met, right? You're going to date for a while, then you're going to get engaged, you're going to make sure that's going well, and then ultimately you're going to get married. So okay, great. And I heard you talk about preparing yourself mentally and personally, like professionally and personally. And you talked about you didn't drink during this M&A process, which a lot of people I hear they take up extra drinking, and you weren't there present always for your wife and for your friends. Talk a little bit about how that impacted you once you got into it.
Yeah, this sale, Joanna, was the hardest thing I've done professionally ever in my career. And it was one of the hardest personal things that I had to get through. You really find out what you're built from through this process. It challenges you on every scale, from the moment you wake up and start answering emails to when you're laying in bed at 1 a.m. thinking about if the decision was correct. So there was really 2 aspects of this. And just on a point from earlier, when you talk to potential buyers, what I learned is all the buyers are just coming in from a place of understanding, not so much from a place of auditing and judging, right? So it's okay to
That's a
converse
great
and have a
point.
conversation, right? It's not like you're going to get in trouble if everything's not perfect in your organization. We were far from perfect, right? When we went through the process. So just having that understanding that it's more of it's understanding, it's not an audit, makes it a little bit easier and less scary, right? To talk to potential buyers. to mentally prepare myself, I think from a professional standpoint, you heard me talk about first going through the conviction that we absolutely wanted to sell because we wanted to make an impact on a larger scale. That was 100% hell yes. Professionally also, with my partner Isaac and myself, getting super aligned on the outcome, right? Getting through a successful transition and continuing to make that impact on whatever organization, which ultimately ended up being Intiva. I think thirdly, you talk about the time frame it takes. I mentioned 2 years. That's like when you sign the LOI, the letter of intent, all the way to the integration end. But you should prep professionally maybe a year or two before then, because you have to plan for tax liability reduction. You have to plan for organizational changes. You have to have all your documents in a place, which we'll talk about here, right? To ensure you can go through the due diligence process. You have to be sure that you have all your ducks in a row from a professional standpoint. I think what a lot of people fail to realize is there's a personal process too. You have to give yourself some grace. First of all, you've been running at 9,000 RPM, and MSPs, this is a tough business. We have to deliver results and be safe with cybersecurity and solve things for our customers. If not, there's 9 million competitors across the US that they could go to, right? So I think from a personal standpoint, giving yourself some grace, slowing down a little bit, and giving time to think through the decisions you're making. I think you have to nurture your relationships. I was not present with my wife for the 6 months of due diligence that we went through. And what I mean by that is, you know, we'd have our Friday date nights, we go out somewhere. I just mentally would be thinking about something in due diligence. So I would mentally not be there. I'd physically be there. I'd have a fork in hand and I'd be eating. But my wife would be telling me something and I would literally be looking at her face and thinking about something else.
I could relate.
I'm thinking about a spreadsheet of expenses that I have to generate, and I'm sitting there and she's right there talking to me about something. Then she asked me a question like, "What did you think?" And I would have to just shake my head and say, "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Because I wasn't listening the entire time. So I had to sit down with her and really just have that honest and tough conversation and say, "Listen, I am mentally not going to be here. I'm going to do my absolute best." And we don't have children yet, but I'm sure the folks that do have children on this call, especially if they're younger, it's challenging. If you don't have that conversation, you don't have a supportive partner in a family to help you get through this very challenging process. I think friends and family members as well, you're not really going to be available to go and hang out on weekends or go on trips and on vacation, because the M&A process is sometimes it can be time sensitive. And the longer you wait, you may not get the value or the outcome you're looking for because you may not have the right information given it's taking you so much time to produce it. And then at the same time, let's not forget, you got an MSP to run, right? You got service desk, you got projects, you got hackers trying to get into your client systems every minute of every day. So when I mentally prepared myself, it's honestly just giving yourself that grace, giving yourself that understanding, having those conversations with those that care about you and love you around you, that it's going to be very challenging. And then just reminding yourself why you did it in the first place. We never lost sight of that, which I thought was very impactful to us, because there were many times where I would sit there late at night and say, this is not worth it. I don't want to go through the process. Let's just forget about it and move on. And that imposter syndrome would sit there front and center and tell me, Sagar, why are you here? Right? You just started this thing not too long ago. What?
Uh-oh, Sagar froze a little bit. I think Sagar's actually in Singapore right now. So I'll talk
about. I cut out all alcohol for that entire year. I'm still alcohol free, like 20 months later. Because I needed to be so focused, Joanna.
Sagar,
I had to deliver 100%.
Sagar, we lost you for 1 minute. So if you want to, you're back now, but if you want to just maybe go back about 40 seconds.
Where did you lose me?
After, I think before the alcohol part, just
okay. Yeah. So I had to be fully aware. I had a therapist that I actually hired to help with talking through this on a weekly basis. I know it sounds strange, but it was so impactful to bounce ideas confidentially, right? And then the no alcohol thing, I had to be so present and focused and aware about what was happening. And the only way I could have a clear mind to essentially have two jobs, right? Running an
Right,
organization and also
exactly.
going through the M&A process. There was a lot of things I had to do for myself so that I could show up 100% of the time and allow the process to unfold successfully.
Yeah, and I think that's key is to really think about this as having those two different jobs, right? Some people have a job and they're going to school at the same time and they're preparing for that to get their MBA. This is very similar because you never want to take your foot off the pedal. And the reason is because you're going through the process of due diligence, let's say for 6 months or a year, whatever that time frame is. The buyer wants to make sure that your business is continuing to grow and that your employees are engaged and that your customers aren't giving notices, because ultimately the price that you agree on is the price that you want to end up with. And the minute you take your foot off that gas, and things start going by the wayside, that may change that ultimate valuation. So moving right along to, creating the right team around you. None of us can really do this by ourselves. I mean, unless you've done a lot of acquisitions and you've got, this under your belt, really this might be your first or even second time. But even if it's your second time, it was probably a long time ago. So today you need to surround yourself with the right team. Can you talk to us about how did you go about choosing the right team? Whether that's like an attorney or did you use a broker? Did you have like a accountability group, right? Because I think it's important for people to start thinking about what that support team's going to look like.
Yeah, and I think, I like to say that you are essentially going to be the quarterback of your team, and you have to get your defensive linemen, your tight ends, your wide receivers. You got to get all these players on your team, not necessarily internally as internal employees. Of course, if you have them, that's a benefit, but you don't have to have them internally. You could have outside advisors, right? So you could absolutely use a broker, right? There are brokers that specialize in the space. They may help identify those initial relationships with buyers in the industry, right? All the names that are out there hunting for great organizations to bring into their own companies. You want to identify attorneys. And I think, Joanna, what's the most important thing before I jump into that is try to find those experts and trusted advisors that specialize in the MSP space.
Yeah,
I can't
very
tell you
important.
how important that is, because when you talk about things like MRR and RMM and PSA, and you talk about all these specific acronyms that are only in the MSP space, of course you could use somebody that doesn't have any expertise in it. It's just going to be longer process, and it's going to be a little bit harder for you to communicate on the same level. So finding folks and organizations that are in the MSP space, from attorneys to CPAs that have M&A experience and they can do tax planning for you, right? Not your same bookkeeper that's been doing your books for the last 5 years with your QuickBooks subscription. It's actually finding a firm that specializes or has experience in M&A transactions, right? So you minimize your tax liability. You want to be sure you have the right folks from a personal level as well. So I talked about my therapist. I talked to him on a weekly basis. He was my crutch, and he heard me vent all the time, right? So I didn't have to go home and talk to my wife and vent to her. I wanted to be present with her. So I had a therapist that helped me. I had a performance coach that I worked with that helped identify how I could show up 100% of the time as well. And then I also wrote down on my notes here, I also hired a trainer in the gym to know that I was physically able and ready to show up, so that I remove any potential roadblocks from allowing me to be the best version of myself. So having advisors, from brokers to lawyers to finance folks to coaches to therapists, that's the team I assembled around myself. And I would engage with them on a regular basis, because that would help me show up the best way that I could for these due diligence calls, for the calls to, discuss our organization. And then also, don't forget, we're running a business still, right? We still have to serve our customers. We still have to close tickets. We still have to be vigilant with cybersecurity. So building that team around you. And the way we found them was either through introductions of folks that we knew in the industry. You can search for those folks online as well. There are companies and folks that specialize in the MSP industry. And really, we chose them based on a core values fit, Joanna. We wanted to work with people that understood who we were, why we wanted to sell, what our vision was, right, to make the impact on a larger scale. And obviously, folks that have done it before, right? We didn't want to necessarily work with somebody that's never done the transaction, but we want to be mindful of experience, because that experience is what's going to lead to a very positive outcome for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so critical, speaking of attorneys, to have an attorney that you could also have a very good partnership with and a clear understanding, and someone who's going to really be your advocate. You know, for me, when I first started this process, I hired an attorney and I had to terminate our relationship because it got adversarial, right? So you want someone that is going to want the best thing for all parties, for you and for the buyer, right? Where they're going to work together. And I agree with you about the experience. I love that my attorney actually went through several acquisitions of other MSPs, and he became a consultant and advisor for me. In addition to that, I worked with my accountability group on a weekly basis because some of my CEO colleagues sold their business or were going through the M&A process. So we compared notes and talked together. And then, of course, my husband, who, you know, helped me through this the entire way, which was also critical. So let's get into the, another really important question that I have for you is, as the acquisition process kind of unfolded, what elements do you feel like made this acquisition successful for both parties? Speaking of that partnership, and could you share some leadership lessons that you learned throughout your journey as the CEO or co-owner of this company, especially in the context of negotiation and negotiating this acquisition?
This was an important part of the process, Joanna. I think two things right away come to mind, right? First and foremost is open and honest communication, whether it's with your advisors or if it's with the buyers or it's the deal team. You're going to have probably 10 to 20 folks that are involved in this process the entire time, right? And the more you can be a good communicator. And what do I mean by good communicator? Getting back to people within 24 hours via email, right? Bringing things up and answering questions honestly. And again, buyers are coming in, at least in our experience, to do an understanding. They're not auditing. You're not going to get in trouble if your IT company is not perfect. No one is perfect. We're far from it, like I talked about. So just being aware of that open and honest communication. Secondly, is going to be that vulnerability.
Let me just pause you
right?
there 1 second, because I
Yeah.
think I want to add to that, because if you find a true partner, they're going to actually help you to make some adjustments or corrections that you have to make to get to the best place. No one wants to buy a losing business, right? It's everybody's benefit that you have a winning company and a profitable company, you know, a stable company, right? So if you're talking to someone even a year prior, they should give you that advice and tell you what you need to do to be in the best position to sell your business. I mean, would you agree with that?
110%, because what that's going to do is just lead to a more positive outcome for you, right? And when I mean positive, it's not just the financial aspect. You want to retain all of your staff, you want to retain all of your clients, you want to retain all of your leaders, right? And continue thriving in the new organization. So that open and honest communication, so important. Secondly is going to be vulnerability, right? We don't have to go into these calls and be ashamed at what issues might be present in your organization today. We're not perfect. And the more you can verbalize that vulnerability, the more you can be open and honest about it, it's just going to make the due diligence process much easier, right? That understanding mentality, not the auditing mentality. And that's what really helped us when we went through this with Intiva. Was the team was very open and honest, and we were very vulnerable, and we shared everything about our organization, because that's what helps get these deals across the finish line to complete the transition. I think thirdly is, putting on this M&A hat, and I'm lucky that I have an awesome partner, Isaac. We were able to support each other. But I understand everyone that's either here today or watching this in the future, you may be the sole owner, or you may have a spouse or a partner that's family or someone related in your organization. Going through the M&A process, that's a full-time job in itself. Not only do you have like 5 to 10 hours a week of calls you have to be on, there's also 5 to 10 hours, maybe even more, of work, of homework that has to be done, because you have to produce documents, right? If you didn't prepare them, you have to produce financial statements. You have to think about customers and how they are operating today and what the future looks like. So if you're in a partnership, really dividing and conquering and having some clear expectations. If there's some days where you show up at 30% and your partner's at 70%, just have them understand that it's a mutual outcome that you're looking for, because on other days they may show up at 10% and you're grabbing 90% of that effort. So if you're in a partnership, really dividing and conquering the responsibilities of M&A. So Joanna, like you said, not taking the foot off the gas, so your company can continue providing service desk, cyber protection, continue growing. You can also make traction happen within the M&A process. If you're by yourself and you're going to be handling this on your own, find a way to help alleviate some of your operational responsibilities in the organization to any folks internally on your staff, because it's totally going to lead to burnout if you try to do all things all the time. If you're not getting the right sleep, if you're not eating right, going to the gym, if you don't have the right mental headspace. And I say this because I felt that. If I wasn't fully supported, I would burn out. And there's no way I would have made it through the process, let alone get to a positive outcome. So I think some of the leadership lessons are around communication, being vulnerable, dividing and conquering, really having those tough conversations, both professionally and personally. And then just really making sure that you don't take your foot off the gas in either aspect of your organization, whether it's the process or growth. Because if you do, it just leads to a more challenging transition period, and it's not going to lead to as best of a positive outcome that you're looking for. And I think I will end that note with, if you're looking and considering in doing an M&A process for your organization, really having your outcome well defined, right? From a numbers perspective, what the roles will look like, what you will be doing going forward, and thinking about that ahead of time so you're not reactively making a decision post-transaction, and then you may not get what you were initially looking for.
So what steps did you guys take to optimize your company's operations and financials in preparation for the sale? Because I really want, for everyone who's on this call, this is my, by the way, last question, but it's how do you get the highest valuation? Like what steps can people take, as they're preparing to get to that point with their financials and operations?
This was a very important part of the process, Joanna, right? You have to prep yourself, right? Before you get on stage and you do your talent show, you have to be ready. So I think from an organizational standpoint, we talked about this earlier, having all of your documents stored in a place that can be easily accessed. And when I mean documents, I mean customer contracts. I mean any type of employment agreements. Having all these documents available is just going to make it an easier process for you to get through. I think from a customer contract perspective, it would have made it easier for us if we had all of our customers on active agreements that were very well defined and actually enforced, right? We had some contracts for customers that had expired. They were month to month. Going back to asking customers to renew during a due diligence process was challenging, right? So having that done prior to going in and signing an LOI. We had hired an accounting firm, a CPA firm that specialized in M&A. So they helped look at all of our books in QuickBooks, and they helped us clean up our financial statements, right? Learning a balance sheet, learning a P&L, making sure that things flow through correctly, making sure that you have an understanding behind trends. You will get grilled on your financials. And I am not strong with financials, but I had to learn to read all of these types of financial statements so that I could confidently share that data when you have buyers on the phone. Because again, they're wanting to understand, not so much audit, but you have to build confidence in the answers you're able to give them. So really having a overview, even before you decide to sign an LOI, having a process to go and clean up the books, make them organized, make them accessible, make them make sense, and make sure you have an understanding so that you can articulate the financial health of your organization for the last 3 to 5 years, right? Where you expect to
Yeah.
go in the future.
Absolutely. And I think for contracts, we had all of our customers on automatic renewal. So unless a customer gave notice, they would automatically renew. And if you're not doing that today, it's something that I recommend. And finally, how did you go about getting the highest valuation for your business? What did you what steps did you take during that negotiation process? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think everyone thinks about valuation in different ways depending on the industry. For the MSP industry, valuation is done based on EBITDA, right? Earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, right? And that number is essentially a marker for profitability within your organization, right? So what was important to us, even leading up to it, Joanna, was ensuring, are we selling our customers on a average per seat price that's going to create profitability for us in the long term, right? If we're trying to win deals just to get the client signed, that's not going to lead to high profitability. And we're not going to try to make that up by reselling products and licenses. So even leading up to it, it's ensuring we have the right price points for our customers. It's being sure we have a very good handle on expenses, right? Are we spending more than we should on tools and software that may be a waste? Are we too lazy to go back and check to see what we're spending money on? We want to make sure that we have good accounting practices and we're spending money in the right places. I think another thing that a lot of folks don't talk about is, how do the owners compensate themselves, right? If you're trying to sell your organization or transition, but you're just going to pay yourself like a nothing salary in hopes that it's recouped during the M&A process, it may not happen all the time, because you have to pay yourself what's called a market rate, right? You have to be able to say, all right, if I'm not going to be running this organization, what does it cost for a replacement to come in to run the organization on my behalf, right? So ensuring you have market rate compensation for you, the owner, right? Because you should be getting paid for your efforts as well. And then also, really, like we talked about, having the books cleaned up correctly beforehand. We had hired a CPA firm that not only specialized in M&A, Joanna, they also handled tax planning, right? So they helped us build out, what is it going to look like from a capital gains perspective? Do we have all of our taxes in order, right? Whether it's state, federal, county, city taxes. That's a big topic during the M&A process, is ensuring you have taxes done.
Huge. I'm
right?
so glad you're bringing
Very
this
big.
up.
Yeah, it's a big process. So really going through, and it's not just, hey, let's bill as many customers as we can to try to get the best transition and exit. It's, do we have the right contracts in place? Do we have the right employees? Do we have the right owner compensation? Do we have the right tax planning? Are our books cleaned up? Do they pass through correctly? Can we articulate them? Can we build confidence in the buyer? You have to do all these things in tandem. That's what's going to lead to a better outcome for you. And the more things that you don't have in order, that's going to become challenging, and it's going to potentially dilute valuation for you as you go through the due diligence process.
Those are great tips. I mean, especially the tax planning. I don't think people think about that. And not only from a tax planning perspective as you go through this process, but also understanding and knowing that when you sell your business, whether you get 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, there's a portion of that money that goes to the government. And I think people come up with this number in their head and they say, oh, I want to get $10 million from my company. Well, they don't realize that they're only really going to get about 6-ish million for their company. And meeting your financial advisor and understanding at where you are with your age and the money that you're actually going to receive in the bank, right? How far is that going to get you? So to really know, people have asked, well, how did you know like how much you wanted to sell your business for? Well, I did some planning, right? I knew that if I hit the age of like 75, I need this much money, 80 if I don't want to work. So I'm still continuing to work because I'm not at retirement age, but at the same time, you do end up paying a lot of money in taxes and you have to be prepared for that. And yeah, so one of the things I also wanted to bring up is when you came, you worked with someone, a consultant who was helping you when you came to companies like Intiva and whoever else you talk to. I think you talked about having a presentation teaser, and I think CBC, who may want to jump in here, talked about having a CIM, a confidential information memorandum. What is that? What does that look like, and what should people put together? And then we'll open it up to a Q&A. CBC, you're muted.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here very, very quickly. So just for everyone's awareness, a teaser is, just as the name suggests, a short document, 1 to 3 pages, that has generally public information about your business, no name, no client names, but to give a flavor of what you do, the size of your business, profitability, et cetera, to drive interest and potential enthusiasm in your business. And this typically comes up when you have engaged with an advisor to help guide you through the process. And so that's a way of drumming up interest and excitement about your business. And then it's from there, once you have a cohort of prospective buyers that are keen to learn more, that's the point in time when you do typically execute on an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and then you provide a document which is a much more exhaustive and comprehensive document, sometimes anywhere from 30 to 80 pages of information about the business, operations, clients, financials, strategy, go forward expectations, organization, et cetera, to sort of give a full view of the business, for those interested parties to put forth a much more firm number in value for your organization. I think what's also the last point I'll make here is that what I just described is typically happens when you've engaged an official advisor, to guide through the process. But if there are instances where you may be engaging directly with someone to proceed down an M&A path, say it's a peer group, a colleague of yours, and you don't feel the need to go through a full-blown sales process, it can be still helpful, while you may not be making a massive PowerPoint presentation, but being able to coordinate and collate all that information together to be able to provide a fulsome view and perspective of your business. That's tremendously valuable. And I'll get back to the point that Sagar had mentioned earlier. If you can do that kind of preparation work earlier, or you do it as part of your monthly close process and the like, or each time you get a new client, you put it in a certain folder. That way you're spending less time having to get things all organized and up to speed when you start to get into an M&A process, because it can move quickly. Time kills all deals. And so you want to be responsive and present in the process. And anytime that you're spending on the M&A efforts and cleaning things up or getting things organized in the heat of an M&A process is time you're taking away from the operation of a business, which is something you've got to remember to keep doing while you're going through the M&A process.
I love that idea. Actually, I don't think you've ever brought this up before, CBC, is anytime you get a new client, to organize all that information into one place, because you're right. It took me a ton of time just to get everything that CBC was requesting from us. So that's a great idea. So I'd like to open this up for the Q&A. For those of you who have some questions, please, if you could put them in the chat, that'd be great. And speaking of preparing yourself, for me, I wish that something like this was available to me when I was thinking about selling your company. And CBC has put together a prep checklist using his own proprietary valuation process. I don't want you guys leaving like thousands of dollars on the table. If you want, you can scan this QR code. You can meet with myself or CBC. I recommend you set up just a brief time to meet with him. And everyone's in a different place right now, right? You're all in a different journey. And so whether you're a year out or 3 years out, I think it's a great opportunity. While I can send you a checklist, like say here, you should do this, do that, because you're in a different space than everyone else, I think you should put together, set up a time to meet with CBC and put together your own customized checklist that will help you to get to that highest valuation. And if you'd like to do that, please scan that QR code set up a brief meeting and we'll make sure that you're prepared for that. There's no pressure. This is really to help all of you. So I do have a question here. Oh, where's Isaac? Did he join Antiva?
He did. He's on the team. We're both hanging out, having a great time.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add in that Isaac and Sagar have been instrumental and the core of our integration efforts following the acquisition of Middle Ground. It would not be as possible without their active involvement and engagement, from December 1st through till now and going forward, to make it go as quickly and as seamlessly as it has. It's really about utilizing the great knowledge, perspective, expertise, and advice that they've had as leading and running their business for Middle Ground, to bring that into the fold here at Antiva. Because the thing that I often like to say is, with each acquisition that we do, there is always at least one thing that a business does that we acquire that we see as pretty dang awesome, and want to deploy out across our entire organization. And so, the people is the most critical element for these acquisitions. Financials are what they are, they take care of themselves. But it's really about the people and the engagement, the trust and the rapport that you're able to establish. And so it's imperative for us that we have them, intimately involved in the efforts after the transition. And what I will say is that, if for whatever reason you're at a point in your career where you're wanting to transition out, you're ready to retire, sit on your boat, pursue other activities, we here at Antiva have the ability and the flexibility and the historical experience to work with owners who are seeking to transition out of the business, either immediately or after a short transition period. So it's really about just putting kind of all the cards out on the table about your goals and expectations, like what Sagar talked about earlier, to make sure that everyone's on the same page so that we can chart that path forward together. We can help you achieve your goals and meet and exceed your expectations, through a process.
I'll put it back on, but I have another question. In your valuation model for MSP acquisitions, how do you account for the total contract value and cost synergies, such as reduced staffing needs and integration of similar or different software stacks?
Yeah, so the way that we think about that is we really try to value the business as if it were a standalone entity, where it's our understanding or expectation that all people are coming over, that the tools and services are continued to be in use. We are an organization that does not intend to buy a company and then slash 40% of the people. That's never been part of our mantra or our MO. Now, that being said, there may be opportunities following acquisition and integration where we can consolidate ConnectWise instances or reduce spend in particular particular applications or other areas. And I think where you can really take advantage of that is if you come over as a rollover equity shareholder in the business, so that as the profitability of the combined organization improves, you see that benefit through enhanced value opportunity for the organization as a whole, as a stakeholder in the business.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? Okay. Let me know if you have any other points on that. And then I have another one. We have a few questions coming in. How much did it cost for a lawyer, CPA, advisor, etc., as a percentage of total sale, or what should be the expectation on that? CVC or Sagar, do you?
I'll add my side of it as a seller, right? And then CVC, of course, your side as a buyer.
Yep.
It really depends, right? It depends on the advisor that you hire. Some charge you a fee to talk to them on a monthly basis to get through the process. Some charge what they call a transaction fee or a success fee, and that can range anywhere from 2 to 5% of the total transaction, right? For lawyers and other advisors, it really depends. Again, how much time. I think what ours ended up being was probably if I'm thinking about this correctly, maybe less than 1% of the total cost of the transaction. So it wasn't anything like crazy expensive, but expect to spend anywhere from, I don't know, 10 to 70,000 maybe for advisors, depending on the size of the deal. That's at least from my perspective. CVC, I don't know if you had anything specific you wanted to add into that on the buyer side.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's, you're probably going to be spending upwards of, low couple $100,000 when everything is included, from advisors to lawyers to accountants to tax to, and. And I think, that it's better in a situation like this to try not to be, penny wise and pound foolish. You want to ensure that you've got an advisor that is competent, responsive, knowledgeable about this industry, as well as knowledgeable about M&A, to make your life a lot more manageable through the effort. I think it's you don't want to set yourself up for failure or potential failure, or leaving money on the table because you don't have a strong advisor in your corner to help you navigate something, because this is something that they do day in and day out. And this is very likely, the one time that you'll do something like this. So yeah, it's important to have those good, smart advisors.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think for me, the response is somewhere around 200,000 for my team. And then I know we're going to wrap up here, but we have a couple more questions. Sagar, Joanna, did you maintain a corporation or LLC structure after selling your MSP? What was your transition process from being a business owner to no longer owning a business? For me, I did not. I just I sold my company and Antiva took it over, and I became a W-2 employee here at Antiva, but I also became an investor, and I own a portion of Antiva.
Same here. Same story as Joanna for myself and Isaac. We essentially did a stock sale. This was a stock purchase by Antiva, which essentially takes 100% of the middle ground shares into Antiva. We are now W-2s as well. We are also shareholders. Our shareholder equity is held in an LLC that we had to create post sale. So the middle ground LLC is no longer there, but our shares are held in an LLC that we created, in the greater organization. That's all done throughout the process. It was very simple, very easy to do. What was our transition process like from being a business owner to no longer owning a business? I think once the deal was signed, we closed on December 1st of last year. We kicked off our integration process. So on paper, we were no longer business owners, but from a process perspective, we're still totally involved in day-to-day to ensure we can get everything integrated fully. The transition process was more mental, right? Mentally preparing yourself and leaving your ego at the door. You're no longer going to be the only one calling the shots.
Right.
Having that awareness and that understanding that you're now part of a team, I think, is what led to some really, really great relationships and outcomes for us.
Wonderful. And the last question is, how do you prepare your employees for the acquisition? My response to that is I started to prepare my leadership team about 3 months prior, because I wanted to make sure that everything was going through. And I assured them that they were still going to have roles within the company. As a matter of fact, kind of to Sagar's point earlier, that they would have even better opportunities working for a larger company with more positions available, more support, more choices, and talk to them about the benefits and all those kinds of things. And then when we closed on the company, we ended up notifying our employees the day after we closed, and the Antiva leadership team flew out to the next day to answer questions, introduce themselves, and get everybody started to integrate within our company. And this was not a question asked, but we ended, out of the 40 employees we had, we only lost 4 employees total from the time we sold to even now. So, and that was, some of it wasn't even because of the acquisition. So we had very low turnover because of the way we handled that process.
Yeah, and the last thing that I would add is that we've been fortunate enough to do 15 acquisitions here at Antiva. So part of the critical piece of our integration playbook is the communication element to it. So we come with, a fairly exhaustive message and Q&A to tee up for employees, as well as a separate set of materials for clients to communicate the transaction to. And so we work very closely. We work very closely with Sagar and Isaac, and we also work very closely with Joanna to tailor those messaging, tailor that Q&A to sort of hit the right notes with their team and with their client base. So you're not starting from a blank page when we're trying to go through what could be considered a daunting prospect of communicating to your team or communicating to your clients. We want to utilize the experience that we've had to help sort of smooth that process for you. And it gets to the point of we are collective and together in our approach here. This is not intended to be an adversarial type arrangement or engagement between the two companies. It's collaborative. And I think that is just an element of where we try to exhibit that to help with this transition effort.
Thank you. I think that concludes the webinar. We've answered all the questions. Sorry for running a little bit over. Thank you for everybody who has stayed on. Like I said to you, feel free to use this link that I've put together here to book your quick session with CBC. I really think preparing yourself and understanding where your business stands today is going to be the key to your success. The more knowledgeable, the more powerful you are. Thank you, Sagar, CBC, for joining today. I really appreciate this, and hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. So take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, CBC. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
See you on the next one.